Good evening, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. My name is Christy. I'm part of the Student Doctor Network team. Tonight we're going to be doing something a little different than some of our previous webinars. You guys are used to sitting and listening. This time we're going to put you to work and get your brains working a little bit. If you don't have them out already, take a minute while we're getting started to grab some paper and a pen. If you have colored pencils or crayons or markers, those can be helpful to you as well. We're going to be talking about mind mapping, which is a brainstorming technique that can help you see the big picture of your life story, your personal strengths, professional competencies, things like that. We'll go through the process and show you how you can use it to prepare for writing your personal statement, your medical school application, even interviews and secondary essays, things like that. Here to take us through the workshop is Carissa Markin. Carissa works in the curatorial and education departments at 2 museums in Central Virginia. She takes the skills she developed as a former trainer for Apple and professionally lectures when she has the opportunity. While suffering from a severe fit of indecisiveness and belief that sleep is overrated, Carissa earned her Bachelor's of Arts in Media Communication, History, and Latin, and eventually her Master of Arts in History. Writing has long been her passion. When Carissa was a graduate student, her papers won national prizes from Phi Alpha Theta, National History Honor Society. She also subjected her love of writing and proper grammar on students during that time when she taught and graded for several college classes. In a geek's dream come true, she had an article published by Mental Floss last year, and when she has the willpower to tear herself away from a book, she can be found milling her own flour to bake bread or rooting for her beloved Atlanta Braves. Carissa, thanks for joining us tonight, and from here I'll turn things over to you.
Well, thank you, Christy. I too want to welcome everyone to this webinar on mind mapping. As Christy mentioned, this is an interactive session geared toward getting you confident about talking about the experiences and skills that make you you. So when you're applying to med school, you want to be able to write an essay that no one else can write or give answers in interviews that are unique to you. In this exercise, you'll be getting to know yourself really well so that you can do that. This will help you be fluent in the life experiences you've had so you don't have to come up with them on the fly, which will make you more memorable as an applicant, which is what you want to go for so you can get into the school you want to get into. All right, before we get started, I just want to cover a few things about what this workshop is. This is about the writing process, not getting into school specifically. So it's for people at the beginning of the personal statement writing process. So it's not intended to help you polish an essay that you've already written. This really is the brainstorming that needs to come at the beginning. It is designed to help you think broadly about your story and, again, just get really acquainted with yourself, essentially. I am not an admissions officer, so this is not designed to help you get into a particular school or anything. This is an exercise that is a helpful starting point for you that you're going to be able to use and then take into any direction that you're planning to go. So let's look first at generalized comments that we want to avoid in the application process. On your screen are examples of personal statements that admissions officers see all of the time. So these really are stereotypical responses that they get. Things like, I went on a mission trip and was inspired to save the world. Or, I've always known I wanted to be a doctor. Or, my dad or uncle, godmother, older sister, somebody is a doctor and I want to be just like them. Or, my grandma had cancer and her doctor was wonderful and now I want to do that to other people. As you can see from the quote on your screen, people write bland essays because they don't trust themselves. So these cliches are really what we're trying to avoid because, I mean, there's nothing wrong with those ideas, but really anybody could write an essay like that. The problem with these statements is that if you sound like everyone else, you're not going to be very memorable. And what this mind mapping exercise is going to help you do is to be able to articulate what makes you unique and what combination of strengths you have to offer. So we want to help you create an essay that could only be written by you. Mind mapping is really a brainstorming exercise that's going to help you organize your thoughts more easily because you're going to be able to see them. Sometimes we can't easily see what inspires or motivates us because there are things that come so naturally to us that we really never have to stop and think about them. So because you may not initially recognize these things about yourself, this brainstorming will basically allow you to get to know your whole story. And this will be helpful to you for the whole application process, so from personal statements to secondaries to interviews. And it's going to help you maintain consistency across these things. So if you have emphasized particular strengths you have in your personal statement, you want to continue emphasizing those same strengths when you go to an interview. The last thing you want to do is give the people interviewing you the idea that you're a different person from the one described in your personal statement. If you can stick to emphasizing the same key points, though, you're basically creating a branding of yourself, just like a successful business would do. So you'll be going into the application process with a game plan, so to speak, and a concrete idea of what you want to communicate about yourself throughout the process. This can give you confidence that will also make you more memorable as an applicant. All right, to kind of give you a picture, here's a graph to help you begin to understand why this can be such a helpful experience. So when you're mind mapping, if you use color, for example, that's going to help you be able to identify themes in your life and help things stand out for you. This will help you remember the keywords that you come up with, which will aid you in recalling things when you're on the spot in, say, an interview session where you have to be prepared for any question. Your mind map will end up being a type of graph itself, and the visual cues, such as lines and arrows or anything else you might draw, will also help you think and identify the things that really make you you. So mind mapping will help you tell the story of who you are and what motivates you. Things to think about. Why do you want to become a doctor? What challenges have you overcome in your life? Mind maps can help you identify key strengths and admissions competencies that you can highlight in a personal statement or essay or interview. Okay, so enough of me talking about it. Let's actually get this exercise started. You're going to want to grab your markers or colored pencils or crayons or whatever you brought with you, and a piece of real paper, and we're going to have to get ready to take a walk down memory lane. Now, just as an aside, you're probably going to want to use only one color for this part because for step number 2, we're going to be using different colors. So pick a color you like because you're going to be seeing it here for the next several minutes. Also, I need to warn you, you've got to let go of your type A. There are no wrong answers to this exercise. There is no wrong way to do this. This is a brainstorming exercise, so we will probably throw out some of these ideas, and that's okay. In fact, in brainstorming, you always throw out ideas. This is to get the thinking process started, so don't hamper your thinking by trying to make this be a fine piece of art or something that you would show your future employer. This is just for you. So let those creative thoughts flow. This first step is going to be a brain dump on paper. You're going to have to think back from your preschool days, or however far back you can remember. If you can remember before that, or if you can't remember that far, that's fine. Think back as far back as you can remember through today, and you're going to have to look for highlights. Now, you're going to want to keep these thoughts and highlights to a word or two. You're not writing a paragraph or an essay here. And you can use the prompts that I'm going to put on the screen to come up with as much variety as possible. Once we officially get started doing this, I'll go ahead and put new prompt ideas up every few minutes to help you keep thinking if you get stuck. You're going to want to write all over your paper, and you're going to want to write the whole time. And you're additionally going to want to draw a circle or a rectangle around each entry you put just to keep them separate. So what does that look like? Well, here's an example for you to help you get started. Now, your paper is going to have more written on it than this one does, but this will give you the idea. Notice the wide variety of options on this paper. There's everything from coloring books to video games to pre-med club to Uncle Stephen. Again, there's no need to write more than a word or short term because you're going to be the only one looking at this. So none of these things will need further explanation to you. For example, and this is actually going to be one that we'll come back to again before the end of the session, but when you see Uncle Stephen listed on the top of this mind map, it means absolutely nothing to you. For our student, though, who wrote this, when he sees Uncle Stephen, he immediately recalls the summer that he spent working for him and the challenges the environment brought with it, because his uncle was always in a bad mood and was impossible to please. So when Freddie, this student, moves on to the next step, all he will need to see to remember that is the name Uncle Stevens. He doesn't have to put anything else. And one last very, very important point before we get started is you're not going to want to censor or edit what you're writing. Don't try to organize it, just write. Write all over the place, go crazy with this. Even if something seems trite or silly, if it pops into your mind, it really should be on your paper. All right, now I'm going to give you guys about 15 minutes to do your own brain dump. So remember, again, there are no wrong answers here. Just keep writing until I tell you to stop. And you can look at the screen for prompt ideas if you get stuck. Again, I'll give you about 15 minutes. Go ahead and get started now. All right, guys, we've got about 5 minutes left, so keep filling out your papers with highlights and memories from your life. And remember, if you get stuck, take a look at the screen for some different prompt ideas to see if that's helpful to you. We've got just a couple more minutes left for this part of the exercise. Don't forget to either draw a circle or square around the words that you're putting down so that you can easily see a difference between them. All right, everyone, it's time to move on to our next step. Now, this is where the fun begins. This is where we start to make connections between the memorable things in your life that you've written down on your mind map and how they relate to strengths and competencies that admissions officials are looking for. So you're going to start by connecting the obvious links by drawing lines. So let's say, for example, if you've listed multiple summer jobs or sports or something, go ahead and draw lines between those, and colors are helpful here. So if you'll take a look at your screen to see our example mind map is back up, you can see all of the colorful circles and lines and everything that have been drawn on this. At the top of the screen, it shows you the list of some of these connections. So anything circled in brown, for example, are things that the student has identified as fun. So hiking was circled, watching Little House on the Prairie was circled, playing the trumpet was circled. Some of them, though, have multiple circles. So while hiking was fun, say, Freddie also circled it in red because he enjoys hiking challenging trails, which means while hiking, he has to solve problems. Uncle Stephen there at the top, which I mentioned before, was circled in purple because he worked for his uncle, so that was a job that he had. But he also circled it in blue because it was a challenge he had to overcome, as he had to learn to work and be productive in an environment that was rather challenging. So you can see that there's no limitations on the types of connections that you can draw. Orange is pre-med path, whereas green things or victories are things that he's proud of. So don't limit yourself when trying to come up with some of these connections. Think broadly and think how some of these things can connect. Now, as you look for these obvious connections, you're also going to have to start to go deeper. You're going to look for meaning behind the commonalities and start to connect the dots like you used to in those activity books that you had when you were a kid. So, for example, did some of the things you list show an enjoyment of a certain type of work? Maybe you had to use a certain skill repeatedly, even if the things you were using it in were quite different. So let's say the problem-solving point that I was just talking about before with our example mind map. Maybe you've put on your map that you enjoy hiking, and maybe you also had a summer when you were a kid where you mowed the lawns for your neighbors. They may have both included problem-solving. So even though these things may seem unrelated, you had to use the same skill for both of them. And that's a skill that you could definitely see helping you in your future schooling and career. So I hope you're kind of starting to get the picture of how this is going to be helpful for you. Another thing that you can think about is that there are several things that you've written down that maybe show that you have a passion for meeting a certain need. Again, we're looking for similarities here between things that aren't necessarily similar on the surface. So as you begin to make these connections, think about the things on your mind map on a deeper level. And I'm going to go back to the example one here so you can once again get a visual. But let's say you're going to list sports as a connection between several of the items on your map. Think about, what does the term sports actually mean to you? When you think about it, do you immediately think of yourself as a leader on your team? Do you think of yourself as someone who's kind of win at all costs competitive? Or maybe you just are more interested in being a part of the team and working toward a common goal with your teammates. So once again, there are no right or wrong answers in this part. Really, you are the only one who can identify the meaning, because this is all about you. Really, you're going to really want to dig deep here and really get to know yourself and begin to think about why you enjoy what you do, or about the things that motivate you that have brought you to this stage in your life. And from this example map, I think you can see why multiple colors are going to be important here. They're really going to help you be able to keep the different themes separate here and allow you to again, use multiple themes for certain entries. So now there are any number of different threads and themes that you can work from as you begin to make connections. But as you do that, and as you look for common threads, you need to consider how they fall under this AAMC admissions competencies list. So these are what med schools are looking for. If you don't really think that your themes really tie into them, then look at your mind map again and just think a little further, since these are the things that you're liable to be asked about. You can also, this would be a great idea, show someone else your map, someone who knows you pretty well, and see if they can't find anything else that you didn't see, because they may be able to help you out with that. But one example in tying your themes to these admissions competencies could be, and I'll go back to sports here because I like sports, but involvement in sports, of course, could show teamwork, but think deeper than that. It could also show social skills, it could show critical thinking or capacity for improvement. So as you begin making these connections, don't limit yourself to a single connection. You're going to want to think broadly and dig deeply so that you can truly understand how the things that make you you are going to help you succeed in medical school and in practicing medicine. And then once you've drawn your lines and studied your map and come up with these themes, you're going to want to write down 5 key themes or strengths that you've discovered from your mind map. So these will be things that you want to emphasize in your personal statement and interviews. And you will want to make these themes applicable to the strengths that are going to get you into med school. So we're not looking for themes here like, I like animals, or I enjoy playing board games. Think a little bit deeper than that. Those things are fine, but what do those things mean to you? If you like board games, does that mean you like to strategize? Or maybe you're motivated by competition. What does that mean to you? What does that show about you? Basically, you need to try to identify the motivation behind the things that you enjoy. So on your screen, you see 5 key themes that Freddie has identified from his mind map. And we'll go through them to, again, give you an idea about how these can apply from the things that he came up with. So the first thing he identifies is that he problem solves best when he's doing a solitary hands-on activity. So he realized this by looking at his dream team example on his mind map. Dream team was where students come together and compete with other groups to come up with solutions to real-world problems. And in his case, his team was having a really hard time trying to work together. So he finally brought in some coloring pages to a meeting, and they were able to work on them and have something to do with their hands as they talked. And for his team, this activity facilitated calm conversation and eventually brought about productivity. So from this key theme, Freddie has identified several competencies that make up his strengths. So things such as leadership, problem solving, communication skills, and creativity. He's also identified that he's motivated to prove to himself that he's not limited by things that are difficult for him. So back to his Uncle Stevens. His Uncle Stevens is grumpy and very difficult to get along with, and Freddie became determined that he was going to do something that summer that would impress his uncle. And later on that summer, he went with a friend to theater camp, even though he had quite a bit of stage fright. But he realized that through the motivation he had learned when working under his uncle, he was able to overcome that stage fright and really enjoy the time that he spent in camp. And while looking at his mind map, Freddie also realized it was that same motivation he learned from working under Uncle Stevens that later allowed him to be able to present a poster at a research presentation competition. So now Freddie is confident that he can and will be able to apply those skills to medical school and practicing medicine. These skills that he has developed show perseverance and the ability to handle and adapt to challenges. So as Freddie writes his personal statement or goes in for an interview, these are going to be the things that he will want to highlight. Perseverance, the ability to adapt to to challenges, problem solving, communication skills, things like that. And he's going to be able to use or to call to their attention real life situations where he's been able to apply these things, including the dream team, the summer that he worked for his uncle, his experience in theater camp, and then he's going to be able to tie what he's done in the past and what he's learned from that to why he believes he's going to do well in med school. Freddie also has identified that his medical interest stems from learning how health is affected by things like culture and socioeconomics and education. He came to this conclusion by looking at his mind map when he first realized, he first noticed cultural interest on a trip to Belize and when volunteering at a free clinic and food pantry. And then after a summer of science camp, he decided to major in sociology while also taking pre-med prerequisites. So through these things that tie together from his mind map, he realizes these interests show cultural competence, science interest, and service orientation. Freddie's also an introvert, and his mind map showed him there are both pros and cons to that. So he prefers to keep his thoughts internal, which can sometimes cause others to not view him as a natural leader. But his thinking process means he carefully thinks through everything. So he realized that through his experience as a TA and when he took a leadership role in his pre-med club, that he learned to think through things more quickly and be able to articulate them. So this point shows communication skills and a capacity for improvement. And then finally, although he prefers to work alone because he's an introvert, his life experiences have taught him how to find a good balance between the two, working alone and working on a team. So this is shown through the many solitary activities that he enjoys, such as hiking, but he's gradually learned to work in and at times even lead teams. So this is true from his experiences with soccer, pre-med club, once again back to the Dream Team project that he worked on, and he was even his class vice president. So having both of these traits makes Freddie confident that he will succeed in a medical career. This is the type of confidence that you're going to want to have when you start writing your personal statement or go into an interview. So the better you know yourself, the more confident you're going to be able to be. All right, so now it's your turn again to turn your map into this colorful array that Freddie's map is in. You're going to organize your map and look for connected themes, and then begin considering how things that are seemingly unconnected actually show your personality and skills that apply to your desire to become a physician. And once you've done that, you're going to want to choose 5 key themes that are depicted on your mind map. I'll once again give you about 15 minutes to do this, and if you get stuck, once more, just look at your screen. I will have different themes listed and change them every few minutes again, and maybe you'll see something listed that you find applies to you. Toward the end of this time, I'm going to put up the AAMC admissions competencies again, and you can begin to identify how the themes that you have listed relate to them. So go ahead and get started. Once again, everyone, you're looking for different themes that connect some of the highlights of your life to each other and trying to determine how they're going to relate to competencies that admissions officials in med school are looking for. So if you are stuck, don't forget to take a look at the screen and see if any of the things listed are any help to you. I've put the AAMC admissions competencies list back up on the screen for you. So as you start to look at the themes that you're coming up with that connect your highlights, take a look at the screen and start thinking about how they connect to some of these competencies so that you'll be able to highlight the really important things that you feel will help you out in med school. All right, everyone, it's about time to wrap up, and I want to leave you with a few closing thoughts. Once you have your key strengths written down, you can begin to think about how you might want to use what you've discovered from this exercise in your personal statement and interviews. So for example, let's say you found one of your themes is that you enjoyed problem-solving tasks. You can talk about how those types of things could help you get into medical school and would help you out in practicing medicine as well. Maybe you've experienced challenges while trying to organize a volunteer group, or while building or programming a computer, or even playing a strategy game. The skills that you learn from those may help you figure out how to study in a new context like medical school. And then when you get into practicing medicine, those skills may help you think on your feet if something doesn't go as planned during surgery, or even help you figuring out a different diagnosis. So begin to, again, make these connections and see how the things that you already do well in your life are going to be able to help you out in med school. And then you got to get comfortable communicating them. So what are your next steps going to be? Well, you're going to want to think about the themes you've identified and figure out how you can use them to tell your story in your personal statement and secondary essays and interviews and everything. And with a little practice, you should be able to take your 5 themes and adapt them to answer interview questions and demonstrate strengths you want to show in your personal statement. And if you have time, I really do recommend that you allow a few weeks or months to pass and then you come back and revisit your map, because this will give you time for continued reflection. And you can often find new things as you revisit your map. And I'm going to leave you with just a few essay details that you're going to want to keep in mind. The personal statement is your chance to set yourself apart from other applicants. So while you're writing it, you got to think about why you want to go into medicine, what you want med schools to know about you that they can't already find in other sections of the application, what motivates you to learn about medicine, and what challenges or hardships you have overcome in pursuing your education. Also keep in mind that there's a maximum of 5,300 characters, or about 1 page, that's allowed. So you're going to have to be able to make these points in a very, very short amount of time, so be sure you know what is most important to highlight. Well, thank you all so much for joining me tonight. I really hope this brainstorming exercise has got you thinking about what strengths you have that are uniquely yours, and ways that you can highlight them in your personal statements or interview. Now I'm going to send you guys back to Christy to wrap us up.
Thanks, Carissa. Just a couple of housekeeping things kind of at the end. First of all, I will direct your attention to that first source on the source list, the AAMC 2015 AMCAS instruction manual. If you Google that, that will give you more information about those competencies and kind of everything that you'll need to know for filling out that application when it opens this summer. Second, if you do have questions about the mind mapping process, about what you heard tonight, you can email webinars, that's plural with an S at the end, webinars@studentdoctor.net. I believe you can also just reply to the email that you were sent, the registration email, and that will go to that email address as well. And we'll do our best to get you the answers to those questions. There will be a quick survey that's going to pop up on your screen when the webinar ends. And if you wouldn't mind taking, it's just 5 questions, taking a couple minutes to fill that out and help us make these webinars helpful to you and keep learning how to make them better in the future. And finally, if you want to hear this again or you want to share it with anybody else, we will be posting it on the Student Doctor Network YouTube channel in the near future. So keep your eyes peeled for that. You can also hear any of our previous webinars there, which could be helpful to you. You can subscribe to us on YouTube. You can also follow us on Facebook or Twitter to get updates about when the recording is available. So I think that brings us to the end of our evening. Carissa, thanks again for taking some time with us, and thanks to all of you who have taken an hour out of your evening We hope that you find this helpful. Good luck to everybody, and have a great night.
Have a great night, everyone.